Okay, well, welcome everyone. Thanks for joining today. I think we're going to go ahead and get started. This month was going to be a little bit different. The leadership team decided that we think December would be a good time to highlight your stories and highlight the LCC successes and their challenges, because I don't know about you guys, but the trainings that are the most helpful for me are the ones where I get to talk to other counties and what they're doing. I learn a lot from what's working and what's not in other communities nearby. So with that being said, we have 3 counties that are going to share with us today. They're going to be sharing about their successes, challenges, just how the year went for them. Feel free to ask them questions. And I think we're going to go ahead and get started with Carissa Miller with Scott County. If you want to take it away, Carissa.
All right. Hi, everybody. I'm going to share my screen. Here we go. All right. So as Katie said, I'm Carissa Miller. I'm the coordinator for CISA Scott County, which is our LCC here. We are also a DFC community. So we've just entered year 7 out of 10. So our DFC funds quite a few of our prevention programs. And then we also have Empower Youth Coalition, which is a youth-led coalition to prevent substance misuse. Our coalition represents 39 different organizations and 80 unique individuals this year. So that's who attended this year. So 26 of our members came from organizations to reduce substance misuse. So most of that is like our recovery community organization, substance abuse providers, those kinds of things. We have 18 members from youth serving organizations, 11 from law enforcement, 9 healthcare representatives, 6 members from schools, and then 8 or other, like generally 1 or 2 from other different types of organizations. And our key stakeholders, we do a lot of prevention work within our school system. So our school districts are one of our pretty important partners. We have a recovery community organization that is a huge partner for us. They provide our overdose response team, connections to treatment. They do a lot of our naloxone training within the county. They provide harm reduction. As a lot of people know, we lost our syringe service program in 2021, but they do non-syringe harm reduction. And then we also have providers. So we have 2 community mental health centers and then other providers that attend our meetings. We have a really good relationship with law enforcement. And so we're one of the 5 counties in the state that were picked to pilot the IREX program, which is integrated recovery. I have to look up the acronym, but what they do is they do a assessment in a jail and then connect to treatment from days 1 through 3 of incarceration. And then that carries through to transitional services once people leave incarceration. We also have the GRACE program within the jail, which is primarily focused on reducing depression in the incarcerated population. And then our probation, corrections, and prosecutor's office provide a lot of assessments and referrals. Our prosecutor's office is actually one of the top referrals to treatment within the county. And then some of the others, like our Scott County Partnership, they manage our DFC grant. They also have our community substance misuse prevention, or I think it's at Katie's grant. It's community youth substance misuse, right? Prevention. They also have go ahead, Katie.
It's fine. It's community-based substance abuse block grant. It's okay. A lot of words.
That's what I was like, wait a minute. We also they have our tobacco prevention programming, juvenile detention alternatives initiative. And then they also house our ECHO program. And then someone said integrated reentry and correctional support program for IREX. Thank you. Because I'm like, that one gets me every time too. There we go. Some of the challenges that we faced this year, we had changes in leadership, both of the LCC and the DFC. Last year, we had a combined person that worked full time that was our LCC and our DFC coordinator. So that person left last year after 12 or 13 years. I think she retired. And we had someone in the interim because we weren't sure if we were going to be renewed for years 6 through 10 of the DFC coordinator. And then we eventually hired someone to do that, and that person only lasted about 3 months. So after that, we opted to split the roles. So I came on as coordinator in May, and I was the vice chair before, so it wasn't a huge jump. And then we hired a DFC coordinator in June. So a significant portion of the year, we really didn't have people in those roles because the person that we had hired that didn't last very long was still kind of in that like figuring things out stage. And I think just realized that the position wasn't necessarily for them. With the changes in leadership also kind of came some shifts in focus. We realized that we had become too DFC heavy. And so most of our goals had to do with youth and we kind of like left out that adult population. So we've been working really heavily on trying to shift so that we have a better balance. Some of the issues that we've struggled with internally is volunteerism is better for some programs than others. So when we're asking for community volunteers or coalition volunteers, we have some programs that people are like really excited to volunteer for, and then others it's like begging people to come volunteer. And like everyone who's in the nonprofit world, right, funding is always an issue. We have been successful in our programs. So this year we had a share-free election, so we kind of got a whole lot of data spouted off throughout the year. And so the first year, so 4 years ago, when the sheriff was elected, that first year they arrested over 1,500 people. And then this past year, they were down to 500. So when we have that lower recidivism rate, we're getting less money whenever it comes to the little DFC funds. So we're not collecting those community drug fees. And then that had a big impact. Our LCC is not a nonprofit, which is why we have someone else that does our DFC grant and the other grants that would generally fall under the LCC. So externally, some of the challenges that we faced were community partners that are not at the table. We have some issues engaging DCS in our county, the county coordinator, just primary care providers and the business community. Another is access to care. So we have a shortage of providers and a shortage of beds. Our county has 2,170 people for every one mental health provider. So that makes it a little bit complicated. We also don't have a single pediatrician in the county, and we don't have an OBGYN that practices here. So just a shortage of general providers, and then especially so whenever it comes to substance use or mental health. We've also seen, like everyone else, that spike in fentanyl in everything. So we've had some pretty significant increases in non-fatal and fatal overdoses. So one of the things that we were really successful on this year is our life skills trainings in the K-12 school systems. Significantly improved youth perceptions and drinking out, like the concept that drinking alcohol makes you look cool. So if you look on the pre-test, we had 81% of youth that felt that drinking alcohol made you look cool, whereas 100% of those youth moved in the right direction afterwards. The other is kids who drink alcohol have more friends. And so we moved from 74.1% to 100% in our pre-post test. And then the other is kids who smoke have more friends. So we moved that from, 81% to 91.7%. So not all the way to 100, but we did shift some of those perceptions. When we look at youth past 30-day use, and then there's one that's worded for binge drinking. If you look here, it kind of steps down in a diagonal to follow the same cohort. So in 2019, the youth that were in 7th grade that year, we had 4.7% of youth that reported drinking 5 or more drinks in the past 2 weeks. That same cohort reported 0% this year. So when you look at the positive changes in reducing alcohol use, we're reducing those binge drinking incidents pretty significantly. We do have one cohort that is somewhat problematic. It's not showing on that binge drinking. But you'll see on the prescription sedatives, we're also reducing substance use. We had a pretty significant spike in 2021 of use of prescription sedatives. And so what Dr. Fry is our program evaluator. And so she said that we saw this spike that a lot of people saw, right? And when things kind of settled this year, they didn't settle as high as they were initially. So the bounce back that they were expecting didn't necessarily occur. And then past 30-day marijuana use, we also saw a pretty significant decline. This is the problematic group. So the youth that in 2018 were in 7th grade, those youth actually almost doubled the amount of marijuana that they were using. That is also a pretty high risk period of time. So I'm not really sure, but we're just kind of following that cohort to see. This year, we also were able to start overdose fatality review board. So we held our orientation meeting in November and then started our reviews in December. So we have started reviewing at Q4 of 2021, and we're hoping that we're going to be able to identify some trends that will inform some programming and reduce fatalities in the community. We collaborated with 39 different organizations to develop a plan for the opioid settlement funds. We were supposed to present last night for the second time to the county commissioners, but they pushed it back to January because their end of year meeting, they were afraid they wouldn't necessarily have the time to work on this. So we will address it in January. And then the key takeaway that I would say as far as LCC stuff is that interdisciplinary collaboration is pretty key to significant and lasting change. Like, I don't necessarily think that we would be where we are if we didn't have the people at the table that we have. And then that's all. I know we have a Q&A section in a little bit, so.
Yeah, thank you so much, Carissa. I know we're pretty lucky in Scott County with our partnerships. It helps us do things we wouldn't normally be able to do. So yeah, I appreciate your presentation. So does anyone have any questions or comments for Carissa?
So I have a question on the data that you presented. I'm assuming that data came from the IYS survey, and we've really struggled in our county with being able to do surveys within the school. So the most recent data that we have is 2020, and we didn't have any schools in our county that opted to take surveys this year. So I would love to hear ideas of how others are partnering with schools to be able to get those surveys so we can have the data that we need.
You know, interestingly, that's been a big issue, I think, across the board, is schools not necessarily wanting to participate in some of those things. So we work with an evaluation team through IUS, and the evaluation team was successfully able to get their own assessment into the schools. And that would be really kind of a Dr. Fry question, because I'm not sure how she managed to do that magic. Because we have the same issue. We wanted to assess ACEs of youth a couple of years ago and got shut down pretty heavily because of child abuse and neglect reporting. And I think that maybe some of the issues with some of those assessments is that they're afraid of having to report. So I think learning to develop some of those relationships relationships with our school partners is important. I think some of the issue too is that the political climate is not really great for that, because schools have, I mean, we watched it last year. They're already talking about what they're going to introduce in January that are kind of like some pretty significant attacks on schools. And so I think probably until some of this settles, we're going to still deal with schools just being hesitant to allow programming or to allow some of those assessments.
Next, we have Chase Cotton from Hendricks County. Chase, do you want to go ahead and take it away?
Absolutely. Good afternoon, everyone. Great. All right, so I'm the community director at the Willow Center. The Willow Center is an outpatient substance use treatment and mental health counseling center in Brownsburg, Indiana. And we are happy to serve as voluntary president of the Hendricks County Health Partnership, which is our local coordinating council. That might be a new name for you. You might be used to hearing from the Hendricks County Substance Abuse Task Force. And I'll explain the name change, or at least the name share rather, here in just a moment. So first, to start with some of our biggest challenges and accomplishments, I would consider them one and the same. Our biggest challenge in the past year was almost exclusively the fact that we were trying to combine several different entities that have had overlapping interest and overlapping work into a single entity. So those four major entities that you see up here in the upper left-hand corner under the health partnership title are LCC, which is the Substance Abuse Task Force, of course, our Mental Health and Wellness Coalition, our System of Care, and our DMHA Client Consultation Board, which is like a prevention-focused group. All four of these entities have been meeting independently for the past year, and for the most part, sharing members. And coincidentally, their focuses were all sort of starting to align. Instead of having these different interest areas, we were all sort of moving in the direction of prevention as our primary interest and focus. So with that overlapping, and I mean, just transparently, with most of us really disliking attending 4 different meetings that were all doing the same thing, we started having some pretty serious conversations back in the early spring of this year about what it would look like to have one larger meeting as our local coordinating council, and adopting a name that already existed for some of these bigger umbrella organizations, the Hendricks County Health Partnership. So that was a challenge, to say the least. It included several weeks of individual conversations and discussion, several leadership meetings and committees being formed to not only just establish or reestablish rapport between these entities that have been sort of siloed, but also to discuss shared interest and need and gap areas and whatnot. But after about 8 months of discussion and planning, we were able to come to some conclusions and some agreements and some MOUs for how we wanted to move forward into 2023. So this visual flow chart, although it looks a bit of a rainbow mess right now, is what we came up with to try and describe this effort. So you have the 4 combined entities sort of at the top on the left-hand side. On the right-hand side, you have sort of the government side of things that have special interest. So the Emergency Support Function 8, which is sort of the primary overseer of the Medical Reserve Corps operated by the Hendricks County government, local government. They're primarily focused on disaster and incident response, but oftentimes that includes mental health components. And they have a crisis response team specifically for those mental health and substance use related crises on more of an immediate incident level. On that second tier, we have what are called our special interest subcommittees. Most of these little bubbles represent coalitions or collaborative entities or work groups that have existed in some form or fashion throughout the past decade within Hendricks County. Our goal was not to squash those, nor was it to supersede those. Our goal was simply to support them in a way that was more connective and collaborative via this larger entity of the health partnership. And so that's why it's all connected, as opposed to all of these entities never speaking to each other. Our primary challenge and accomplishment this year was to start getting them to speak to each other and working together toward common goals. So each of those special interest subcommittees has its own sort of voluntary leader and lead agency, if you will. And now the leaders of those groups make up sort of like the advisory board or the leadership board of the partnership, and are speaking into the establishment of strategic planning and accomplishment of goals. On the bottom tier, you see sort of interconnected consultants. And you see the Hendricks County Community Foundation, as well as a group that exists to consult on diversity, equity, inclusion, which is made up primarily of members of Hendricks County Pride and Hendricks County Alliance for Diversity, as well as some folks from our system of care that have interest in that area. The reason why we didn't make them their own special interest subcommittees is that we really like those diversity, equity, and inclusion folks to consult every single piece of this tier, of this workflow, because we believe it's important to all of these interest areas, and it shouldn't just be, kind of put in its own corner, because we've seen that fail over and over in Hendricks County. We really want their voices and their influence to be represented across the board. So that's why they're sort of represented as a consultant influencing all of it. And the Community Foundation has played an integral role in some of this collaboration effort, which I'll go into more detail now. So our biggest supporters and stakeholders, this is both for the task force, the substance use task force as it's existed previously, as well as now currently under the new assumed name of the partnership. The Community Foundation has been there from day one, both as a funding partner, as well as more sort of a consulting partner. They've been very influential on the assessment side of things for need assessments in our community. And they continue to be great supporters in prevention efforts of mental illness and substance use. Of course, there are a lot of behavioral healthcare providers that represent themselves and their agencies in the partnership. Law enforcement agencies, all of the major ones are represented. Most of our public school districts are represented, at least the mental health providers within those school districts are there. Several different nonprofit agencies with vested interest in what we're doing are there. And then, of course, the Department of Mental Health and Addiction has been a key supporter and stakeholder. Unexpected results. One of the biggest unexpected results of this year was a behavioral health assessment that the Community Foundation directly funded. So we already had sort of a general health assessment that our hospital systems and the health department were part of facilitating. And then back in 2019, pre-pandemic, there was also just sort of a general community, just interest, need assessment that the foundation had established. But it became apparent throughout that process and throughout the pandemic that, of course, mental health and substance use were in the top 5 needs and special interests for the community on all of the assessments that were done. So Community Foundation decided to take a deeper dive into that data, as well as to do some really interesting focus group work. So they funded it with like $35,000, which was awesome. Nobody had to apply for it. They just hired the consultant and got the work done. And it was really nice to have that consultant doing a lot of the administrative tasks. Since I am just volunteering and the Willow Center is generously volunteering my time to the LCC, I don't necessarily have all the time in the world to complete that sort of task. So having the consultant support from the Community Foundation's donation was amazing, just to coordinate some of the meeting and documentation and whatnot. That process was super collaborative and very efficient. I mean, it consisted primarily of focus group work and steering committee work. So the steering committee was made up of partnership members and a lot of the leaders of those special interest areas that you saw from that flow chart, all speaking into the gaps that we see, the goals that we think would be most realistic, and taking a really deep look at the data. And then the focus group side of things was getting direct feedback from the clients we intend to serve, from community members who are in long-term recovery or pursuing long-term recovery, from community members that have lived experience with mental illness, with recent incarceration, and so on. We really wanted to hear their voice speaking for themselves. And so we were able to get that qualitative component in a way that was really cool. All those special interest agencies, the lead agencies from those areas, conducted focus groups with their clients. So between 10 and 30 individuals from those special interest area agencies met together individually and asked the same questions. And then we all brought that feedback from our clients to establish our goals and really take a serious look at what we wanted to spend our time on for the coming years. So that health assessment, that process for the focus groups, it's going to provide the partnership with a roadmap of strategies, goals, and action steps for the next 5 years. And it's we're calling it our strategic plan, which I feel like is a little boring, but it is what it is. As far as any advice that I would share based on the experience of getting all of these people to work together, getting not only making the kitchen bigger, but helping all of the cooks work together in a way that makes sense. I would consider a good piece of advice to do everything you can to reduce silos and overlaps. Pursuing deeper and wider collaboration already has paid off for us. We had our first meeting of this bigger entity in November and our second one in December, and there's just an energy that wasn't there before, right? Having people in the room, both who had already been at all of those meetings, but also some folks that had never even met each other. It was kind of a catalyst to new conversation, new commitments to different volunteer activities, and a commitment to trying to establish and achieve the goals of the strategic plan. Those silos and overlaps are sometimes due to power struggle, sometimes due to ego, sometimes due to special interests related to a specific agency's needs, and sometimes due to just good old-fashioned politics. But if you can find ways to build bridges between those silos, ultimately, I do believe we can do more good. Don't be afraid to ask the hard questions and say the hard things. It's likely going to challenge people, but ultimately it's better for both parties to collaborate and find a healthy solution. So what I mean by this is early on, just to share an example, early on in the meetings we were having with these leaders, somebody had to say, what we're doing is not working. And nobody wants to hear that, right? Nobody wants to hear and look at the fact that, well, frankly, overdose rates have doubled in Hendricks County over the past 2 years, despite our best efforts, right? And mental illness has more than doubled in the past 2 years, despite our best efforts. So we have to say the hard thing, like, it's not working. Why? Right? Even though that ruffles feathers, even though the people in charge of the efforts, including myself for the past 2 years, feel just a little ping of failure, right? We can turn that into an impetus for change and improvement. Doesn't have to be cruel, but it's got to be honest. Find your doers to partner with in pursuit of your goals. A handful of doers is way more powerful and effective than an army of passive participants. Anybody who's leading their LCC in the room, which is most of you, knows what I'm talking about. You have an email list of 500 people. You have about 40 or less that show up to your monthly meetings. And then of that 40, you have about 10 that will volunteer to actually work on things with you. I just want you to know that that's normal and that's okay. And those 10 people can change the world. They can, right? If you're really willing to guide them and plan strategically on how to use the different skill sets and special interests and talents that those 10 doers have, that's enough, right? You don't have to have all 500 people on your email list doing it, right? Sometimes you just need their signatures on a letter that you send to the local town council or whatever it is. Last but not least, identify your gaps and be honest with yourself about them. Turn those gaps into goals. This is sort of similar to asking the hard questions, but sometimes you got to look at it. For example, in Hendricks County, we just have not done a good job including the business community at all. There are strong chambers of commerce doing awesome work, but they don't even know the partnership exists. And that's super problematic. So that's an honest gap that we got to be honest with ourselves about trying to address in 2023. So the more honest we are, the faster we achieve those goals. So thank you very much. Any quick questions? Yeah, cool. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Chase. That advice is incredibly helpful. I know a lot of people are probably relating right now quite a bit. So our last speaker is, well, for our LCCs is going to be Michelangelo McClendon from Marion County. Michelangelo, do you want to take it away now?
Sure. Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Michelangelo McClendon, the Executive Director for Drug-Free Marion County and the coordinator for our local coordinating council, which is called the Marion County Prevention Alliance. Some of our past annual successes have been that we actually made it through the year as a coalition with our partnerships, having a diverse leadership that leads our coalition. Might be a little different than what is normally done with the coordinator leading. Our coalition is made up of diverse community members who cover predominantly all the 12 sectors of what's usually identified as a DFC. But in addition to those 12 sectors, we also have recently added the elder population, so people 55 and plus on our coalition. And we also have added some law enforcement that are doing specialized victim impact work that's unique for us at Marion County Prevention Alliance. And so the coalition works and looks at, as most of your coalitions do, what's happening in Marion County and provides that information to all of our community partners who also share their information. The other success that we had was we were we have been privileged to have a partnership with both the state county Department of Health, state Department of Health and the county Department of Health, as well as local health systems from mental health recovery to actually youth health as well. But the unique thing with our partnership with Marion County Public Health Department, they have come on board to make sure that our grantees who are awarded grants under the LCC funds will have evaluations of their programs. And that's a twofold thing. So the programs are evaluated at the end of the year, and this works for two ways. It gives Gerald R. Marion County and the Alliance, Prevention Alliance, actual data that's specific to Marion County and the programs that we have funded in Marion County that allows us to produce information from not just the county perspective, but right down to the neighborhood or the areas in Marion County that we see as problems. The other caveat that works for us as a coalition is it provides data specifically for that agency who is funded to go out and get their own resources through other grants if they didn't have the opportunity. The other part that we've been successful in the past is transitioning. So this will be my third year. My second year is the actual embedded executive director and coordinator. But in the transition, we had to, with the coalition, we had to get back in compliance under the CJI umbrella of what a coalition is supposed to be and what the LCC is supposed to be. So we are at that point now, and I'm really grateful that we got in there. Part of the accomplishment is that being the accomplishment. The other piece is that we restructured the way we funded our grants because we were getting feedback from the community that prior to the change that grants were not inclusive or equitable in the way they were being funded. So we made some changes with that along with our coalition leadership and our board of directors and myself, and the input from myself, which is 20% of our funds are now allocated to grassroots organizations and startups to make sure we're giving funds to people who are sometimes don't have the opportunity to apply at a county level or state level, but they can come to us to apply for those funds as well. Some of the challenges that we have faced in the past year, and I'm sure you guys have as well, has been turnaround for staff. Has been a very challenge for us. Drug Free has been around for 23 years. And so we have literally a staff. I just literally lost one yesterday. So now we're down to a staff of 2. So we have, that's a huge challenge for us, but we see our way through the challenge with the help and support of our partnerships on our coalition, also our community connections that we have as part of Marion County, as well as being transparent in what we need as a coalition and what we need and what I need as executive director has been very valuable. We just had our annual meeting for this year where we were able to discuss where we were able to come from when the transition occurred for Marion County and Marion County Prevention Alliance. And that is having to bring the agency out of insolvency, which was keeping the doors open because it was going to not be there, and trying to find funds that we were having to restructure to figure out where to get those from. So I'm grateful that we were able to do that and still be around and to see 25 years of work done. Our biggest supporters, and this may sound cheesy, but it really is our entire coalition. Our meetings, when we had the pandemic and on through to going back and then doing a hybrid of in-person and virtual still, we're still averaging about 30 people that attend our meetings every month. And we've gone to every 2-month structure, so you guys know some of the things that we changed was Marion County is the largest county, of course, and the data that comes out is not necessarily monthly. So what we were able to do is create a 2-month, every other month structure for our coalition with leadership and committees meeting the opposite months that there are not 4 meetings of the coalition. And that has allowed us to gather more resources, data points to create more conversations at the coalition level so that there's actual work being done and people feel like they're meeting to make a change and impact the largest county, which sometimes feels like we don't make a change because there is so many different ways and silos in Marion County. So that's the biggest change we've done there. Supporters is all of our coalition members, honestly. They actually let us know where we need to look at. And as a coordinator, I'm grateful for that. There's a charge to bring in different, to make sure that we're being inclusive and bringing in different people who are reflective. That may be by race, that may be by gender, maybe by sexuality, of all of Marion County. So that is my charge that they have given me, and we're creating those relationships as we go forward in the new year. We are extremely supported by both the County Department of Health, by their expertise, and actually there's a staff of HIA that sits on our committee. So that's even important. And we're extremely supported by Marion County Health Department, who has gracefully, because they've attended our meetings as part of our partnerships, offered us funding to do the evaluations for our grantees because they found the value of the work and the information coming from our coalition. And that was really important for us. Some of our unexpected results, and being the largest county and having a coalition that I think, in my experience, both from when I was at CJI, DMHA, and now at this level, the perception is the biggest challenge that we face at Drug Free Marion County and Marion County Prevention Alliance. The perception that we are this entity that don't have these challenges that the smaller counties have. And when I mean challenges, I mean financially. I mean challenges of turnaround of employment. I mean challenges of the people that are on your coalition are the ones that are working against you. And that was very hard to hear and get information from other community partners. So that was our biggest challenge, to know that we were working in a space of inclusivity and working together to bring information and prevention efforts across all of Marion County, with people who were in our coalition for that reason was not happy and did not bring it to the coalition to create it, but created anarchy against the coalition and having to address that. And that helped us create some tools as a coalition. And so there are some different tools that we're moving forward in the coming year that we placed upon our grantees and all of our coalition partnerships. If there's an issue of conflict, we have a conflict agreement contract, and part of our grant process would be a conflict. I can't remember what they called it, but the leadership called it. But if there's an issue, that they can come together and go in front of the board and the leadership to create those spaces of safety, inclusion, and adherence. And so those were the biggest things that we walked away with. That was a challenge for us this past year. My advice to the coalitions, other coalitions, and DFCs is rely on each other, because when there's a perception that one knows better than the other, that's not always the case. There's also a perception that we don't help each other. That's truly not the case. The information I got back from the person that was on our coalition who was creating the problem came from another person in the part of the state. And if they're on this call, I just want to thank you, because I didn't know, and it caused us to be aware that we still have work to do. And you're not going to please everyone. You're not going to please everyone. And if your work is your passion, this passion is your work, for me and how I move, that's what I have to sleep with at night. I'm not going to, we're the largest county. I'm going to piss somebody off. I'm aware of that. And the other piece that we have as we move forward is making sure that we are completely reflective of what the county looks like. It's important to me as a person of color to make sure that we're representing the largest county, and those voices, faces, and experiences are represented from our coalition. So that's what I would give as a takeaway. Thank you so much. If there's any questions, I'm willing to answer. And that's one thing. There's so many new names. I don't know everyone, but all the other guys I've worked with when I was my time at the state, hey.
Thank you so much. I know, again, incredibly valuable advice. I know everyone can relate to and can take back and use in their LCCs. Does anyone have any questions for any of the three? The ICN leadership team, we came up with a couple of questions, but our presenters did such a great job. They answered all of them already. So does anyone have any questions for our presenters? Okay, well, thanks again. I'm sure everybody really appreciates your time, and it's interesting to hear the parallels between everybody's organizations. I know all three are such different communities, but it's interesting to hear how everybody kind of lines up. Let's see. So moving on, we're going to have Rebecca from the Indiana Recovery Network talk to you guys for just a little bit and kind of explain what she's got going on. So Rebecca.
Thank you. I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen. Okay, so I'm just gonna go over the Indiana Recovery Network and the Regional Recovery Hub. So my name is Rebecca Gorell, and I'm the manager of the Indiana Recovery Network. So the Indiana Recovery Network was created in 2017 by the Indiana Addictions Issues Coalition after identifying a need for a collaborative recovery support network. We understand that treatment and prevention is super important, and but there also wasn't anywhere for recovery supports to live at that time. So we wanted to create a network where if someone was looking for that aftercare, that after treatment piece, they could, go to one place and get solid information on recovery supports. So the website went live in 2019. We started with around 20 to 40 members at that time. And our goals at the time were to remove barriers to accessing those recovery supports and services. We now have over 100 recovery-focused organizations, and a lot of those are recovery community organizations. And we did just launch a new certification for recovery community organizations so that they are now able to bill, which is exciting information for our local community partners. We also host monthly meetings for all organizations, members, and external organizations to attend and learn and connect with the local recovery resources across the state. On our website, our resources are categorized by SAMHSA's 4 dimensions of recovery, so health, home, purpose, and community, and searches can be conducted by city or zip code. I do want to say that the Indiana Coalition Network and the way that the Indiana Coalition Network and the Indiana Recovery Network align is that your guys' structure was created based off of the Indiana Recovery Network structure. So we mirror each other very similarly, very closely, which I think is pretty cool. This is just a screen grab from our website. So at the top, you can see the resources tab. If you click that, that's where you can do your resource search. You can also connect to our Regional Recovery Hub program on our website. Check out our recovery organizations. We also share current news and events statewide. So if you're ever interested in any recovery events that are upcoming, definitely check it out. It stays pretty current. Allie does a great job of keeping our website beautiful and up to date. And then we also have a member portal as well, where our members are able to connect and collaborate with each other through the website. Through the Indiana Recovery Network, we have created the Regional Recovery Hubs, which is a state and community partnership through the Indiana Recovery Network, the Division of Mental Health and Addiction, and the Governor's Office of Next Level Recovery. It was created in 2020 as a response to the COVID pandemic. So everything shut down and people were cut off from their recovery supports and services. And so, the state saw a need and they wanted to put some action, put their money where their mouth is, essentially. And so there was a concern for the state's most vulnerable Hoosiers, so those being in early recovery or seeking recovery during the pandemic. And that is how the Regional Recovery Hubs were born. So the goal was to help mobilize the peer workforce, provide services and supports to marginalized communities, so rural communities, even the urban communities that face different challenges. All of our hubs had existing critical relationships throughout the community. So, they were selected specifically based on the work that they had already been doing in their areas. Our hub program does cover all 92 counties, and it is an access point for community. So it can be for pre and post treatment, or if someone is looking for family support or they just need help figuring out where the local food pantry is. Our hubs are able to provide that information. We also encourage our hubs to create MOUs and contracts with other community resources such as hospitals, the justice systems, community corrections, community centers, food pantries, etc. We want to get peer supports everywhere that we can to let folks know that recovery is possible. And we're just, just right next door, right there, ready to help. Again, it's based on meeting people where they are. So a community-based model. All of our hubs are able to operate in the gray areas and fill in those system gaps since they're not attached to or tied to any specific entities. So if someone goes into the hospital, sometimes they can get a recovery coach if they're at a certain treatment center. They're able to work with that coach for, 30, 60, 90 days, but then they're set out into the wild on their own. Our hubs and our peer supports are able to work with individuals as long as they need. There's no time constraints or limits, and all of the services are free. Again, it is strengths-based, so utilizing recovery capital and making sure that individuals are supported, where they need that support. And then again, not tied to a specific treatment provider. So our services are, there's not a lot of restriction on the services that we're able to provide. This is a map of the recovery hubs. So when we started this, we broke the state down into 5 regions. So Northeast, Northwest, Southeast, Southwest, and Central. We were comprised of 16 hubs in the beginning. Then we grew to 20 hubs. And in 2023, we will actually be growing to 21 hubs. So this map will get a makeover in the next few weeks, and we will be expanding again. We also have peer supports that are available on 211 24/7, including holidays. So as we know, since we're since the holidays are right around the corner, this is a really hard time of year for a lot of people. And so having those peer supports available day or night is super important. All of our peers on 211 are trained on how to access the other resources within 211 so they can provide those warm handoffs, whether it's a crisis call or if they just need a regular 211 navigator. And there's no time constraints on our recovery coaching sessions either. So someone can call and just have a brief 5-minute conversation, or if they need to have a full coaching session for an hour, we're able to provide that as well. We also started a program in partnership with Lyft. So if a person needs a ride and they're a person in recovery, they just need to connect with one of our local recovery hubs and they will be able to access this Lyft program. It's been a super successful program. We've seen really, really great numbers from this program. So we're super excited about it. It launched in April and it's just been a powerhouse program. We need more money because funds do run out super quick because it is so successful. But it's great, and it's for rides that apply. Rides can be provided for anything that apply to the 4 dimensions of recovery. So anything that falls under the health, home, purpose, or community. It's not just to treatment or to meetings. It can be for the grocery store, or if your car broke down and you need to get the kids to daycare and yourself to work, we're able to help provide that as well. We also have an app available. It is called the IRN Peer app. And when you download it, you'll open it up and you'll see these chat bubbles across the state. You can click on one of those chat bubbles and send an anonymous text message and get connected to a recovery support that way as well. We've seen great success with this in our more rural communities where, there's still a lot of stigma around reaching out and getting help for, SUD or mental health concerns. So, it's a great way to break the ice and get individuals engaged in services, while they're still in that contemplation phase. And this is our contact information. So Heather Rodriguez is the director of the Indiana Recovery Network, myself, and then we have 2 project coordinators, Sean McDonough and Charles Porter. And that is us. Please feel free to reach out to any of us anytime for any information. I do want to kind of backtrack for a second and say that we do have some of the LCCs that are members of the network. So if you are not a member of the network and you're interested in becoming a member, please reach out to me directly and I can share with you about our membership and the requirements to become a member. And then I encourage you guys to sign up on our mailing list on our website so that you can attend our monthly meetings as well. Yeah, so any questions?
I just have a question about the LIFT program. So I had recently seen a map and I don't remember where I saw it, but is all of Indiana covered under the LIFT program or is it only certain areas? It was a little confusing on the map.
So Lyft can be kind of hit and miss in our more rural communities. But with the relationship that we have with Lyft, we've been told that it's kind of like a reverse supply and demand. So even if we know the community may not have Lyft readily available, we still encourage our hub teams to request the ride anyways, because then drivers will see that there's more of a demand in that area. And so then more drivers will start to populate that area. So even, we work with our hubs and ask them to, find other means of transportation as well, but we still, excuse me, we still encourage them to book those Lyft rides so that we can drive up the Lyft drivers in that area.
Okay, well, thank you again, Rebecca, for speaking. I know we just wanted to call everyone's attention to just another resource for you all to check out and maybe become engaged in. We've only got a couple minutes left, so I'm going to turn it over to Janet with ICJI to give an update. And then after that, I will turn it over to Jody to close us out.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone. I'm going to try and keep this short. I do have a couple of announcements and heads up that I want to give out. First, as a reminder, Q3 submissions will be opening up January 1st, and they are due January 15th. I've already sent out the first reminder email of these are the instructions, and this is how you fill out the quarter report. I'll be sending out another reminder after the holiday weekend, and then a final reminder pre-opening up on December 30th. Following that is another great reminder, the Great Lakes Mental Health, Addiction, and Prevention Technical Transfer Center does offer a lot of trainings. Again, friendly reminder, they are a great resource for people in your community and for those in your networks to take advantage of. I please encourage you to do so. We will likely be working on a survey about the opioid settlement. We expect to have it ready sometime in January, and we'd like to keep it open for 30 days. So we have something to present at the next Commission to Combat Drug Abuse meeting next quarter. Amanda is I want to take this opportunity to introduce Amanda, who, as some of you may or may not know, is the replacement Sadia when Sadia left us. Amanda is newer to the agency. She is a delightful person. She's very excited and eager to work with the LCCs in regions 2, 4, and 6. We'll be reviewing Q3 together. And then after Q3 submissions, then she will be the point of contact for regions 2 and 6. I will still be available as a resource for anyone who needs it. But I would encourage you to reach out to Amanda and get to know her. We'll be sending out that formal introduction email after Q3 submission. And otherwise, that's all I have. And it's been great chatting with you all and hearing more about what's happening in your counties.
Thanks, Janet, for the update there. And just want to take a few minutes here to just thank everyone. If anyone has any questions, feel free to jump in. We appreciate all the speakers today and hearing kind of the recaps of what's going on in your areas. As we wind down the year, we are going to be sending out a survey the first part of the year, and we'll follow up with our meeting in January as far as what the future looks like for us. But we are hopeful things are going to move in some other areas with some positive things coming our way. So we will definitely keep you all updated, and please feel free to reach out if you have any questions, and happy holidays to everyone. Stay safe and warm with the weather coming in. I know it's kind of like we're right on the edge here. Is this going to happen? Is this not going to happen? What's going on? So stay safe, everyone. And thank you again for a great year with the ICN.